Designers and Builders, where design meets construction. We explore groundbreaking trends and talk to the pros reshaping our spaces. For your dream home, workspace, or just great design inspiration, subscribe to Designers and Builders.
Hey everybody, welcome to today's brand new episode of Designers and Builders. This is your host, Alyssa Olson, and today's guest is Josh Seyfried from Studio Seyfried. How you doing today, Josh?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me, Alyssa. Excited to be on this episode. You've had a lot of really fun, interesting folks. I've had a chance to listen to a couple of them. So excited to bring sort of the landscape architecture side of things to the conversation.
Yeah, very excited to have you here. Thanks for taking the time. And I have to say, you are tackling the largest of scales of anyone we've had a conversation with today. So very excited to be chatting with you.
Attempting to tackle. It's an incremental process, but yes. I will imagine that this will probably be the blurriest of conversations about sort of how someone practices and what they do. So
that's okay. Let's blur it out. See what happens. A little Gaussian blur on it. Who doesn't love that?
You're losing listeners by the second if we start dropping Photoshop terms.
Okay. All right. Well, so let's pick back up on your backstory. I know it involves growing up on a farm in Michigan. Now you're in Seattle. Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, it's interesting. I am realizing a lot of people don't really know that I grew up on a farm in central lower mid Michigan. I think probably because I don't usually tell people that. But I usually lead with I'm from Michigan, from the Midwest. But a lot of people are really fascinated when you tell them you're from a farm. And then they're even more fascinated when they find out like, oh, that's still actively what your family does. And so, whenever I go home, that's what we sort of jump back into. But I can definitely say that I probably would have ended up completely different had I not grown up on a farm, because I was from a little kid have, work responsibility. Mm-hmm. Waking up at 7 a.m. to go feed the cows, or like baling hay and straw all summer long. Like I never worked in restaurants. I never did any of this. I never had those sort of like common high school jobs. It was always farm and work and all of that. But even then I knew, I was like, fun, but this is not like career for me. Mm-hmm. But I don't, my dad, my brother, my grandparent, like they were all in. That's what they loved. And I was like, no. And I was fortunate to go to a high school that had a technical program that sort of served our larger sort of county and adjacent county areas. And so like the technical program taught all sorts of things like small engine repair and welding. But one of the classes they had was technical drafting. And so we started just like drawing houses and copying house plans in high school. And like we'd alter the plans. But I realized looking back, like I was always obsessed when we got to the site plan portion of the design.
Okay.
Like I could care less about, drawing the wall section and insulation details. But like when it came time to like, where does the sidewalk go, and like drawing the tree symbols, I was really interested in that. But no one told me that like there was a thing called landscape architecture. So I was sort of led into architecture and did that for a year. And I think even then I realized like, I don't want to do that. I'm like, maybe there's this like golf course thing. I'll design golf courses. So like even at first year of college, I still had not heard the word landscape architecture.
Wow.
And it wasn't until, I actually transfer out of where I was in Metro Detroit up to Michigan State, and I get in the program that I'm like, I didn't know it was like, I thought it was just like golf course design, and you learn about like parts and TODs and planning and da 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 da, and it was just like really sort of eye-opening.
Yeah, big time.
Like, yeah, and it's not a thing. I mean, this is sort of a problem with our profession, as you know, right? It's like, it's not a thing that's taught at a young age. So like, every little kid knows what an architect is, but no one knows what a landscape architect is.
Right. And they're often used interchangeably, but the scope and scale is vastly different.
Vastly different. Vastly different. And, you know, and even today, like one of the things I struggle with the most when I meet people is if you say landscape architect, technically that could mean anything from designing a really small backyard to like shaping entire cities overseas.
Yes.
Everything fits within that. Whereas architecture is a little more prescribed and defined, right? You're talking about like it's a determined envelope, and that thing either goes wide and there's multiple of them, or it goes really tall and maybe there's a couple. But it's like, you know, and yeah, you could design residential to multifamily to skyscrapers. But at the end of the day, it's still very sort of like rigidly defined in terms.
Yeah, very contained.
Yeah. Whereas landscape architecture, it's just, I always tell people, I'm like, if it's not a building, we touch it.
Yeah.
But then I go, even if it is a building, I'm like, sometimes we make suggestions about how to touch the shaping, the massing, and all of that.
Absolutely. Edge conditions. I've always understood the dividing line is water. Buildings, you try to keep it out. Landscapes, you try to harvest it inward.
I've not heard that. I like that. Yeah.
That's true.
Well, to go back to like your origin story question, I think what I've been realizing is like from the time I graduated undergrad to now, it's like there's been sort of like 3 chapters in my career so far, all been defined by somewhat like I don't want to say unfortunate timing, but definitely not the greatest timing. So I graduated undergrad in 2009. It was a 5-year program. Otherwise, I would have graduated in 2008, but it didn't matter because 0809, the Great Housing Crash. I sat unemployed for an entire year, spent that summer baling hay and straw. It was a great reminder of why I went to school. I ended up only getting one job offer out in Central Washington. So did that for a while. It was very straightforward, like Parks and Rec, trails. But it was a startup firm. So like it was me and 2 other people. So I had to do everything, including when those 2 left, run the office.
Okay, you dove right in.
It was trial by fire. And so, but it was really great because you got exposure to everything. You weren't just sort of like new person. We park you over here. You will do these tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that was 09 to 2012. And it was born out of pure desperation, right? Like there were no jobs. You had to go at that time where there were jobs. I was the 3rd person in a graduating class of like 26 to get a job. The following year.
Wow.
A lot of my undergrad classmates spent many years out of the profession, and some of them are finally coming back. But during that time of living out in Central Washington, it was also like I started to, like a lot of things, it's like, you know, even in landscape architecture school, they still don't necessarily like tell you all that landscape architects can be, right? Because there's only so much time and capacity to sort of go through all that. And so I was out here doing things that it was great learning, but I wasn't really excited about the projects. And I've always been sort of curious by looking up like firm studios and like going to their websites and like seeing what folks were doing. And it just so happened that while I was living out here, the Seattle waterfront competition was going on. And I was mind blown, completely mind blown. Because it was a full on sort of like reshaping an entire city led by landscape architects.
Yeah. Incredible.
I'm like, well, I didn't know we could do this.
Right? Yeah. Another expansive moment in your career of understanding what landscape architecture can be.
Oh, 100%. And like, I started to Google who these folks were, and I was like, oh, this one team had just won it. It was field operations. And so I was driving over to go to the community meetings because I was just fascinated. And I had a very fortuitous interview that really set me on the path to where I am today. And that was at SWA Laguna Beach. I remember the gentleman's name because, like I said, it completely shifted the course I was on. It's like a 2-hour interview. It's going great. He's showing me all this work they're doing all over China, and it's like reshaping cities and huge parks. And I'm just like, wow, this is it. And he sits me down at the end of the interview and he's like, yeah, it's been really great talking to you. And he's like, I can really tell you're passionate about this. He goes, but we don't really hire anybody unless you have a graduate degree. He goes, I went to Harvard, so you should think about that. And again, farm kid, Midwest, first person in my immediate or extended family to go to college. I was widely impressionable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's what I got to do. So I started doing research. I'm like, well, where does this Jim Corner guy, like, what's his deal? Where do they come from? And you come to find out it's like, he leads the program at Penn. He wrote all these books with Charles Waldheim on landscape urbanism. And I was like, wow, I'm like, this is a sign.
Absolutely.
And the funny part is like, I got rejected by so many schools that like I thought in my mind were lesser. And I was like, oh, this is not good. And then the Penn envelope comes and I got accepted.
Congrats. Huge.
And so that, obviously that's where we met, but that triggers me moving to Philadelphia. And we're, did 2.5 years we were there. But then even so, it's like that start the next chapter. We graduated in 2014, which, if you recall, also not a bell year for jobs. It was, I don't know, I can't remember what exactly was going on, but like the economy was a little slow and sluggish, and competition was really high.
Really high. It was really hard to get a yes.
It was so hard to get that second interview. And I was just getting no's left, right, and center. And then, something happened the summer after we graduated that really like left an impression. And it's sort of like indicative of life and sort of how the world works in general. And that is like the connections you make are super, super, super important, because you never know who that person knows and who can, who they can connect you with. And that summer I was working with a professor, Chris Marcinkowski. He was a new Penn professor, but more importantly, he had been at field operations quite early on and leading a lot of their sort of urban designy sort of projects. And Chris is like, well, I'll put you in touch with Jim. And that was incredible, because to that date, all the interviews I had been having, all the conversations I was having, no one had done that for me. So we were just going into these things cold. And like, if people don't know who you are, and as you know, like, and you see this in business, but it's like that first meeting almost never, ever leads to anything. You're laying the groundwork for something, but when you're fresh out of school and you have a first interview,
you're a name on a list.
You're a name on a list. And so it really helped a lot that, like, the grad school connection, the network you build there, their willingness to sort of connect you to their colleagues and like fellow alumni. And yeah, I remember it was like the week before Halloween, and I interviewed on a Wednesday, and they were like, can you start Monday? And I was like, like, we need to slow down for a second.
You're like, Monday next month?
But from there, like, it was off to the races. Like, it literally, the next 8 years were some of the most incredible 8 years in practice. And like, I think one of the things I always tell people is like, you need to acknowledge how fortunate I've been, because I've done things in the last 8 years at that office that friends and colleagues will probably never even do once in their entire professional careers.
Absolutely.
And so like, I always was like cognizant of like the humility of all of that and like how important that was.
Yeah.
And that really, like, that started the whole sort of exposure and access to working at like city shaping scale, working big East Coast cities from Boston and New York and, from smaller little places up and down the Eastern Seaboard to like big projects overseas, working in Singapore. And at the time we were working in Tel Aviv. And then I spent the pandemic working remotely from my living room on a project in China, taking calls 7 a.m., 10 p.m.
Oh yeah, living that global lifestyle.
Yeah. And it was super incredible. And then, after a while, it was sort of pandemic New York, which you could do a whole podcast on, like surviving the pandemic while living in New York City.
Same with San Francisco.
It became too much. Like my then fiance at the time, we were like, well, what do we do? I had been there for 8 years. She had just gotten there. I was kind of over it. Like, still love the work, but just the life in the city was just too much. And so had an opportunity to come out here in Seattle, work for a bit, because I had always been fascinated by Seattle, and I was living in Central Washington, so I never really got to scratch the Seattle itch.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that was 2022. And you fast forward to where we are today, or even, if you sort of retract it a bit to last year, I saw an opportunity to try to bring that level of sort of call like critical thinking, sort of design excellency, thought leadership, however you want to call it, bigger picture system thinking, to Seattle. And I was like, well, it's kind of now or never in terms of trying to start a shop.
Yeah.
And so I started Studio Seyfried last February. And that started this sort of the third chapter, if you will, of great fortuitous timing, because the market just went belly up. Private development was just on hold. Like it was on ice. Like it was brutal, and still is. Public funding was still seeing the last sort of trickle from Biden era initiatives, but like even that was slowing down.
It's drying up. Yeah.
So yeah, and so I start this company, and like most of us, no formal business training at all.
That is not part of what we paid for.
Not what we learned. And so, I started to call everyone I knew who had been in firm leadership. And I was like, what I got every book I could find. I'm like, what do I need to know? And a couple of things became very clear. And it was funny. You'd see some of these books that it'd be very clearly written. It's like, if you're reading this, you're probably a landscape architect is starting their own business. You should come to terms immediately with the fact that you don't know anything about business. So surround yourself with people who do. And so it's like, find an insurance agent, find an accountant, think about attorneys. And not only do you have to find those things, you need to find the subset of those disciplines that operate within the professional services industry.
Yes.
And so there was a whole boot camp of like, how do you start a business? We're not even talking about how do you get clients right now.
Here, this is just setting the foundation.
Start a business. And it was wild, because we were like, well, we can be a certified small business enterprise in Washington State. Took months, a lot of paperwork, interviews, resubmit this, resubmit that, all of the various licenses and things you got to do. It's like, no one ever tells you that when you're in an office or when you're in school. I mean, I'm slightly fortunate in that I had always taken interest in all of that. Like I remember one time at field operations, I walked in to Jim's office and it's like, look, man, I want to talk to you about sort of my billing projections for next year and my utilization rate. And he does a chair pushback like a movie. And he goes, wait a minute. He goes, utilization rate. He's like, you're one of the few people that have ever used that term in front of me. He goes, good. Like, he was impressed because
Yeah.
the reality is most people don't even know what that means.
No, been learning a lot about it lately. And over the course of a year or two, not just
So working on getting it from 10 to a little higher than 10.
85%.
85. Yeah. So, that there was I was going to say, like, the business side of things really isn't like, there's not a time frame to that. I mean, we met with our accountant a few weeks ago, and it's like, you're constantly learning the art and practice of running a business. Like, I don't know anyone that sits back and is like, got it. Yeah, I know how to do this. It's like, there's always something as you grow, as you change, as you do this. I mean, it is constant gymnastics just to, like, keep the doors open.
Yeah, and as you talk to people and learn things and get new information, and you're just constantly evolving and shifting, and just for that foundation level, right? Just to be able to do the thing that you want to do.
Totally. Well, and on top of that, so I'm dealing with sort of how do you start and then run and then monitor a business. There's a whole side where it's like, well, we gotta make money. We need clients. And that's where it started to get really interesting for me, because my, decade worth of work and connections and whatever were East Coast based. When I came out here to work, I still wasn't working locally. I was working on sort of larger campus plans in Southern California. So I wasn't laying any sort of, groundwork or tracks, however you want to place it, in terms of developing local relationships.
Interesting.
Like, at all, just because I was so preoccupied with all the work, out of state doing this. It's just, there wasn't the time for that.
Right. Right. And it's also part of how our profession operates right now, right? You can do work from anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, it's often are anywhere but where you are. So you have to find that extra time and effort to put into developing those relationships and finding those people and projects and all of that.
Oh, 100%. And so I very quickly realized, I was like, oh, I'm starting a new business to try to bring an aspect of landscape architecture, right? We already said how big and vast it is. I've always historically operated in sort of the blurriest end of the spectrum, which is sort of that urban design, sort of urban realm, master planning world, in a region that historically doesn't necessarily have much of that happening locally, with an entire group of clients and consultants and collaborators that I barely had any connection to whatsoever.
Yeah. So how do you thread that needle?
So I mean, well, and that's where it goes to sort of, I told you how, like, Chris, to some degree, was paramount in terms of, like, not only like getting me a connection, but sort of like that, the unspoken lesson of, like, the friends you make along the way are definitely, there to help you out. And I just started calling folks that I knew back east that had offices here in Seattle. And I was like, I just started asking all of them, like, put me in touch with any of your colleagues you have that are working out here. And that just started this sort of chain of events of, like, leapfrogging. And I learned very early on that, like, if you can get in and have a conversation with folks, and you can connect, it's like the opportunities, like, abound. And what do I mean? Like, that sort of like that was a nonsense statement. But again, this is another sort of thing that, like, you don't really learn, is like the art of business development, even. Right. Like, I was at an office where work just came to us because, we had a name.
My name.
But, like, to just show up, it's like those first interviews we said, like, if you just like, hi, I'm Josh, I want to work at your company, like that almost never results in you doing.
Not gonna. Yeah.
And so I have to, I spend a lot of my time just laying those tracks.
Sure.
And a lot of times that means a first meeting where it's literally just about connecting. It oftentimes we don't even discuss work whatsoever because you're just trying to connect on a personal level.
Yeah, build that relationship, get to know if you wanna collaborate, if it's, it's kind of a courting period.
It's yeah, it's it's totally it's totally dating. 1,000% dating. And it's just it really is something that I feel like if a lot of folks in our industry don't understand sort of like broader business concepts, a lot of folks understand even less the art of business development and the art of creating those relationships.
I would 1,000% agree. That's not something that's ever touched on, like relationships, communication skills, visual communication, absolutely, can draw.
Visual 100%.
Absolutely. But having these conversations with an idea of how you're marketing yourself or where you might want it to lead to and how you frame all these thoughts, it's the Wild West.
No, 100%. And I mean, you have to also like sort of like mentally harden yourself to the fact that like, yeah, I'm going to go to this meeting today and it almost certainly will yield nothing other than hopefully an agreement to like have another conversation at another undetermined, undefined date in the future.
Or maybe to connect you with someone else, the next breadcrumb, the next seed, the next step.
That's interesting. That was something to give my wife her credit. I think she was the one who told me, or she actually asked me if I'm asking people when I meet them for recommendations on who I should meet within their network.
Good one.
And so I've started to, whenever I meet anybody really, whether it's a developer, city agency, whatever, I always ask them like, who within sort of your peer group should I know? And then like, give me someone else in the A&E industry who you work with a lot that I should connect with. Because your conversion rate, that's business terms. Your conversion rate is much higher on just getting email responses if you can connect back to a common point of reference.
Mm.
I very rarely get any responses to cold emails. Rarely. Very rarely. But the second you can associate a name with someone, it opens up doors to at least conversations. Now, the actual quote unquote conversion rate to actually getting a project. So we're doing work within sort of the public sector, which is funny because it's historically not been sort of where I've practiced. My background has almost been exclusively in the private sector.
Got it. At the urban scale, but private.
Urban scale, public-private partnerships, developing parks and stuff like that on behalf of developers with the city usually just being sort of a constituent or a reviewer in the process.
A lot of reviews. Yeah.
A lot of that. But now out here in the Pacific Northwest, there's hardly any private development. And so we're falling back on old relationships in Central Washington from when I first lived out there, working on some fairly good sized park feasibility studies.
Good.
No one's willing to open up the purse strings right now. So it's all a very slow game.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to like, what's that first sort of organic, like, someone gives you a call or you finally get an opportunity to pursue something based on, those months of conversations. And I'd say a few weeks ago, I got a call from a large office to pursue something. Ended up ultimately passing because the architecture program kept changing and it just became a little too unrealistic. But that person I'd been having just sort of, conversations with since last February, and it took till a few weeks ago to really get a, hey, we got something we're going after. Do you want to be on our team?
Okay.
And like, that's I don't like, I wasn't ready for it to take that long.
Yeah, that is a long time.
Yeah, no one is, but the reality of like, well, again, everyone has their own reality, but not to speak super generally, but one of the things I did early on was talk to a lot of people who started their own company. And I was like, so like, what's the deal? Like, how long are you just walking through the desert without any water? And a lot of them are like 3 to 5 years,
That's what I've heard as well.
you know? So to be a year and a half in and have, you know, projects under contract, we found out we're on multiple teams for a big upcoming sort of multi-year on-call roster, which is exciting.
Yes.
And by the time anything comes from that, we'll be over 2 years old. But like, again, another thing no one really prepares you for is just how long it takes to gain any traction, to create that foundation. I mean, that said, it's funny because, I'm sure you and I both know that, or are familiar with stories of like small business starts up, they come out of the gates really hot. Woo, we're super excited. We're going to do this. And then they close their doors shortly thereafter.
Yes. I forget the percentage. It's maybe Simon Sinek knows, but a large percentage of people close their doors within the first 1 to 3 years.
So,
Sure. Yeah.
But again, I think at the same time, like us in this sort of like in our corner of the design world, there's like a delusion to us that like, that didn't really cross my mind. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't cross my mind of like, oh, the failure rate's really high. I was just like, oh, this could be tough. I wonder how long it's going to take.
Right, yeah, you're on the optimistic side because there are so many good examples of it working.
Oh yeah.
And so you can, that can also be your story, but there's a dark reality that it often doesn't work out.
It often doesn't. No. And, will I be doing this for the next decade? Who knows? Because I mean, the other story too with a lot of folks is like sometimes they prove successful enough, they sell the company or become absorbed by another larger company, whatever. But it's just, yeah, it's a lot of things. It's a world of like unknowns, and it really is the age-old trope of like figuring things out along the way. And like I said, we know this. We hear these things like, oh, it's incremental. You'll figure it out as you figure it out. And it's just, it hits so much harder when you're like, oh, it's a business. It's my livelihood. I have loans to pay off. I have expenses coming in. Like, the whole sort of figuring out as you go becomes so much more critical when the margins are so thin.
Yeah, you have to take action, right?
Well, I think here's the part where we don't name names, but like there's a reality about our industry that a lot of the firms we know, how did they become, not how did they become successful, but like how did they survive long enough to become successful? Yeah. Someone behind the curtains had money.
Yes.
And whether it was a generational wealth or whatever, I can think of half a dozen quickly off the top of my head. That's like, yeah, that's how they were able to like withstand, walking through the wilderness for a couple of years. I'm always like, yeah, I grew up on a farm where money was cyclical, infrequent, and inconsistent in terms of where it came in. Like,
Yeah.
there's no trust fund. There's no sort of like family bank account.
Yeah. It's literally feast or famine.
And
it is what it is.
And I think that's important because, a lot of folks do sort of like, build a business, scrap and pull themselves up on the bootstrap. But like mentally, it makes a big difference if there's a cushion or something for you to fall back on, as opposed to, no, what you see in the bank account is what it is. And that number keeps going down. There's either way is fine. I have this conversation a lot with friends about sort of, some of the legacy companies we know. And it's just like, yeah, that's how they survive. That's a very real part of business.
That is true.
And yeah, it definitely doesn't help matters over here.
Right. Yeah. And I've explicitly been told that. I had a boss who had won a design competition and had pocketed 50K, and that was enough for him to get his business off the ground. But he just needed that pocket of money, which most people don't just have sitting around.
No. I mean, I got really lucky in that. Again, I think if there's a theme or like a plea that I could sort of like put out to anyone who's starting a business, it's like, do not burn bridges and build and maintain relationships with honestly as many people as you possibly can. Our first project came in from an undergrad classmate of mine last year. He needed design support on this big sort of arena development project he was working on in Michigan. And it started as just sort of a joke back and forth on a text message. And I was like, well, just why don't you just hire me? Ha ha ha. And next thing you know, we're like, in a contract negotiation.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Like, who's laughing now?
And that was, that was enough to get us through last year. And so, it's funny. It's like, I talk to other folks and they're like, oh, I've hit my target for the month. And I was like, wow, it must be nice to be able to hit targets. I'm like, well, I'm just burning cash at a consistent rate. It's not spiking. I have an eye on that, but I'm like, when there's no work, there's no work. So you can't, targets are only targets if you have something to throw at it. And luckily, we've been taking it year by year, and it's like the first half of this year was just very like
Brutal.
depressing is the reality. Like, I feel like a lot of people, there tends to be like when you hear these sort of like new startup people that, I think a lot of them never really say like, no, it was fucking depressing and anxiety induced. Like, really, like when you are running a company and there's just goose eggs for invoices month after month because there's no work, there's no projects, there's no this, everything is like, well, maybe in a couple months it'll turn around. And then, luckily for us this year, 3 things kicked off August. Like now, like
right now. Yeah.
Now.
In real time.
That will sort of right the ship by the end of the year. But those swings and like navigating them just like mentally and emotionally takes a toll. And I feel like, it depends. Like, some people say it, but I feel like a lot of times it just kind of gets like glossed over. It's like, yeah, it's times were tough and, you had to make do however you could. And it's like, I don't know what world you're living in, but like, I woke up with like fucking fear and panic for like months on end, being like, well, I would pat my calendars with meetings, right?
Okay.
Try to disconnect with as many people as possible.
Yeah.
But
keep moving forward.
You maybe start like, because it's like, I'm new. I know I don't have relationships to the point where they're just gonna hand me work. I have my background, what I've been doing, but people put less of a value on that because that's associated with some sort of like institutional capacity. And now everyone wants to know, what can you do under this new guise? And that takes a long time to demonstrate that. And so, for every month we were invoicing $0. I mean, I was going out and about meeting dozens of people every month. Just, let's touch base again in a few months. Let's just, let's, if we see something that comes your way, let's chat. But like the emotional toll of like going to a meeting, knowing you're like, it's not about this meeting. It's about, this 5th, 6th, 7th meeting, but I have to go to this one put on a happy face, smile, talk the good talk, in order to get those meetings further down the road. But it's I don't blame anyone that is like clinically depressed or on anxiety meds, when they step in a situation like this.
Right. And finding that fortitude within yourself to keep doing that day in, day out with no return. Honestly, it is like dating, or maybe I'll speak to my own dating life, but you just have to like keep getting after what you want. And you
It's
just have,
so much worse than dating because I don't know about you, but sometimes the first meeting yields results.
okay, that's fair. I'm gonna drop the analogy right now because it's also your livelihood depends on it, right? Like you need our economy is based on having dollars. You exchange dollars for things, and you have to have dollars coming in.
Like you go on a bad day, you're like, I shed that off, move on to my next day. And it's like you go on a bad meeting with a national level architect, like you could have poisoned the water.
Yes, you could.
Like
Good. We could be fired.
yeah, real thing. Like that first impression you leave can make or break your entire relationship with a company that has a national presence. Even more so on a local presence, because the thing I realize everyone says it everywhere, and to some degree it's true, but like even more so, it's hyper amplified out here where it's like it is small and everyone knows everybody out here.
Same where I am.
Well, yeah, you're small. Yeah,
It's even smaller.
everyone knows everyone.
But so at least you're aware of that, right? You can operate knowing that and try to.
Yeah. I think one of the things that like I've been really trying to be cognizant of is managing emotions. It's really easy to get yourself real worked up and pissed off going into a meeting where nothing's going to come out of it. Like, do you know what I mean?
It's kind of you're expecting nothing and you still have to go through the motions and the emotions. And how do you just calm that within yourself and have enough confidence to just get through it and just keep moving forward?
Or even, that that third or fourth meeting down the line, and you just want to be like, come on, like, please, like, let's do something. But like, you have to, no, well, you don't have to check it. And we've all known people who don't check it. And that doesn't, and so it's just like, it's all of these things. And it's funny. It's like 95% of my day is spent doing things that I had to intuitively pick up throughout my career. It was nothing taught in school. There's no books about it. Like, it's sort of, like I always joke with people, and a lot of students are always fascinated, like when I sort of recount this like wild wandering path, and I've worked at really incredible places, and like, how do I do it? How did you get in there? What do I got to do? And I'm like the thing you have to be more than anything is just curious. You cannot wait for someone else to tell you what you think you need to learn. Like, you need to take the initiative. You need to ask the questions. You need to sort of be present and be engaged. And if I wasn't any of those things, none of this would be happening. So luckily I am. But again, that's like another misnomer. Midwestern farm kid. That's not usually how we end up.
Usually not.
Traveled
far and wide and worked around the world.
So
yes, you could imagine that.
Very, very fortunate, very frustrated, very delusionally optimistic. All of those, all the feels and emotions,
Yeah. So is there something that would help you? Like what would help you, or given your current situation?
Well, I mean, I think if you want to look at it on sort of, two avenues. One is sort of like what would help in the sort of quasi unrealistic aspect. And that would be sort of cloning myself, if you will, to be in more places at once, because the relationship is one thing, right? Like creating a connection is one thing, but being present is super important in this industry. And that usually doesn't mean just sort of like digital, like you have to be at the stuff and the things and have the drink and go to dinner and grab the coffee. And this region here is just, I'm doing it. You know, I hopped on a flight to go to Spokane just to go have lunch with some folks the other day. And our region is just so spread out.
Yes.
We don't have the luxury of being on the East Coast and having, half a dozen major cities within a
train ride.
well, a train ride. And so, I'm trying to go down to Portland and make those connections. But even that, you're talking a 3-hour drive one way.
Right. Not billable project time or business development time, or, it's just your time.
Yeah. And it's, when you're a new business, not like you can just hire employees to be like, all right, you're the face, of the company down there.
Yeah, get a TaskRabbit for that. It's fine.
Yeah. So that, I mean, the presence in sort of multiple areas would be the sort of, the science fiction-y sort of desire. I think that one of the biggest things I'm struggling right now is, and I don't know how to help this because I'm actively trying to solve this, is how to translate, the last 14, 15 years of my career in a very hyper specific type of thing, both like physically and visually, to a market in a region that is very much the opposite. And I've noticed some of my barriers is like people not understanding how the stuff over here, on the left translates over here, say to the right side of the table or whatever. It's like, well, we don't work and think at that scale, or that's too designed or whatever. Yeah, I've heard those. I've heard that a lot. And so it's like trying to figure out how to I need to Princeify or Madonnify myself. And how do I, it's not rebrand, but it's like, how do I resell what I'm really good at in a digestible format out here?
Yeah, just recalibrating.
Sure, yeah, to recalibrate, however you want to put it, and it's just really challenging.
Well, yeah, and it's like as if urban environments aren't complex enough. You're already thinking at that scale of all these complex things, but then there's another layer because it's a whole new place and a whole new environment with all of its own layers. So, how do you kind of become enmeshed in that?
Yeah.
But with extensive history and portfolio that's relevant but different.
Well, and also that sort of embedded preconceived notion of what heavy emphasis on the landscape architect is, especially out in this region. To some degrees, it's still very much a very close knit community. It's very sort of like the power structure is still very sort of like classically organized when it comes to sort of big picture thinking, the planning, the big sort of city shaping projects, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just sort of like there's whole levels of sort of almost like sometimes it feels like education. It's like, no, first of all, let's not refer to me as landscaping architects. Let's not focus on the word landscape.
Yeah. Zoom out, a couple clicks.
I mean, it's just funny. It's age old complaints about our profession, right? Like this is nothing new.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of this identity crisis of, people just don't totally understand or grasp what we do or what we can do or capable of, or, just how to put all these pieces together.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and even the messaging of it, right? Like tonally to sort of get your message across on the East Coast or whatever, is completely different than how you have to message on the West Coast. Like the cultural shift is real and palpable. And if you can't navigate those waters, again, as a company, you're just going to be DOA.
Yeah, I will say two things. One, I think this needs to be a part one interview because I have design questions, but the business aspect, it's so funny because with the interior designers that I've been interviewing over the past few months here, a lot of them really have their business acumen and sense of what they need to do in their business is very clear and cut and dry, right? Which is incredible. Like, so they're navigating that and then also have ample capacity to do their design work.
Yeah.
But as someone in landscape architecture and urbanism, you're at this planning scale, and it's just this whole other level. And we don't have business training, we have design training. It's just how do you even develop that as a business, let alone from a messaging standpoint? And I will say something I observed on your website that I think was really powerful is talking about the transformative public realm places and beauty for all people. You know, just like the way that you have found to, and it's not even marketing, it's truly just what you do and what you believe. Like, it is there. And so I think you're on totally the right track with everything. It's just how do you get these other complex layers in order?
Yeah. No, 100%. And I mean, I think that's why, you know, I joined ULI. I'm one of the only landscape architects that is member of maybe not a member, but is active in the ULI Cascadia ULI Northwest is, I think, what the chapter's called. I'm constantly trying to meet folks at the development level, but at the city level too, because a lot of it is, there, some of the folks I met at city planning out here, it's funny. We don't talk project talk at all. And I purposefully am like meeting with them not to do that. I want to just have conversations on sort of urbanism and urban thinking, to let them know, like, it's basically sort of like my way of, like, my ninja style way of, like, sort of demonstrating thought leadership from a different angle. And honestly, and I tell them too, I'm like, I'm like, I just need to have these conversations because, in professional practice, a lot of times, like, you don't get to have these sort of, like, opportunities to philosophize about things. And
Oh, yeah, that's not part of your billable hours.
no, but, like, they're these little crumbs that, like, it's the little wins, if you will, that keep you sort of, moving, crawling one step forward. It's like,
Hope and catch the wind.
I got another crumb. I'll take another 2 steps. But yeah, it's totally navigating a world that blends. Design is at the basement. It's politics, it's governance, it's, sociology, like, it touches all these things. And, like, don't get me wrong, there are moments when I just think, God, wouldn't it be nice to just plunk some trees along the right of way and, like, stamp a planting plan and call it a day? Like, why can't I allow myself to just simplify things? But it's when you do have a really inspiring and, like, critically challenging conversation, it's really exciting. And it just, it's another sort of, like, big burst of wind in the sails, and you try to just keep stacking those up to keep going.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's the best you can do, right? Just keep letting that excitement drive you, building those connections, nurturing those relationships, and hopefully getting really juicy projects out of it.
It's all I know how to do. If there's more I can do, and I wish you would have told me a long time ago. Yeah, this is what happens when two landscape architects talk. It's like, I don't know. What do you know about business? Same as you.
Yeah, highly educated, don't know anything. All right. Well, any last thoughts or advice you might give to someone else or a younger version of yourself?
I'd just say thank you for inviting me on here, and it's good for my own mental health to get this out to you and not my wife and all of your
I'm glad to be your backup.
but I think it's also, I think it's a good conversation to have because it's, it's almost 40 and be finding these things out for the first time. You know, you say advice for my younger self. I think that the hard reality is I don't think even if you would have told me all these things when I was in my 20s, I don't think they would have really sunk in. I mean, nothing sinks in when you're young and in your 20s. I mean, I didn't realize good grades meant you had higher opportunity for getting into better colleges and getting You know what I mean? Like some things you just have to trial by fire.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I'm doing it now at like 39 and not, 49 trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to lay the bricks a little faster, pick up the pace, figure it out as you go.
Yeah. Make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah. Well, it's the fastest way to learn. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you for your insights, your honesty. This conversation is so different than all the other ones. And it's also lovely as ever to catch up with you. So, yeah, thanks for just bringing that to the designer and builder community. Everyone definitely check out Josh's website, studioseyfried.com. And hopefully we'll catch you in the future for round 2 and see how it's going.
Thanks, Alyssa. Always lovely to see you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh.